We recently showed you how to live like a king in Bali, but we didn't talk about one of the biggest misconceptions people have about moving to Bali, and that's taxes. People who want to go to Bali rarely talk about the tax complications. They imagine it's a tax-free paradise. Today, I'm going to tackle the biggest misconceptions about tax-free living in Bali. Now, there is one tax hack that you can use. We're going to give you all the details on that, as well as how taxes work for everybody else in Bali. Quick note, if you're in Southeast Asia, Nomad Capitalist Live tickets go on sale April 15th. We've got the co-founder of Apple, the former president of Mexico, Glenn Greenwald, and dozens of more speakers. Go to nomadcapitalist.com/live. Here's the deal on Indonesia. It is not a tax-friendly place. Now, Bali is one of those places. We were saying this when we were filming Living a King in Bali. Bali and Cancun are two of the only ones that I can think of where people almost detach them from the countries that they're in. People might have heard of Bali, but they might not have realized it's in Indonesia. And so when you want to move to Bali, you need to get a residence permit in Indonesia, issued by the Indonesian government. They've got the My Second Home program, also known as the Golden Visa. There's other ways you can get a residence permit. You're going through Indonesia. And the same applies to the taxes. Now, one of the things that we were talking about when we were on set was how many foreigners moved to Bali and just figured, hey, these people don't seem to have it together as much as where I'm from in Germany or Spain or Canada, and they just figure they can slink in and out on tourist visas, or they can have a quitas, or they can have some kind of residence permit, and hey, nobody will find them. And so, as you know, I'm the goody two-shoes of the offshore world. We don't look at it that way. The reality is, while Indonesia does have tax incentives for business, they've got a program if you invest in the new capital, certain kinds of companies that open. The average person moving to Bali as a digital nomad or as one of our clients, we ask for clients with $1 million or more in liquid net worth. Our clients have location-independent businesses, or they're location independent, even if their business isn't, or they have crypto or stock portfolios. There aren't really a lot of incentives for that. And so people will get, for example, a quitas, and then they'll just spend their lives in Bali thinking, hey, what are they going to do? Here's why Indonesia is not the place that you want to do that, because Indonesia actually has more subjective tax tests than other similar countries in Southeast Asia, and it puts it much more in line with some European countries than the emerging world countries that we talk about. Let me explain what I mean. In Colombia, for example, I have a home in Colombia. People ask me, what about the taxes? Aren't the taxes crazy? Well, actually, there's some of the lowest taxes in the OECD, but I don't pay the taxes. I do pay property taxes on my home, but I don't pay income taxes. Why? I don't spend the requisite number of days required under the days test. I believe it's 183. And in a country like Colombia, and in a number of countries like that, where the tax system, particularly for foreigners, isn't as complex, if you spend just under that 183, then you will be tax non-resident. Okay. Now, you want to be tax resident somewhere in most cases. Don't take that as tax advice. It's just kind of my personal philosophy. You want to have some tax residence, but you don't want it to be in a high tax country. And so you'll see other countries in Southeast Asia that apply relatively similar days test, at least for foreigners, where as long as you're not spending that number of days there, you're not sucked into the tax net. What we see in places like Europe is, but do you own a car? And they're like, all right, well, you weren't here 183 or whatever their number is. But hey, you own a car, so we're going to tax you because it feels like you live here. And Indonesia has more of this. Here's the wording from our own tax terminator. Indonesia can be very subjective. The two tests they apply are, number one, intent to reside in Indonesia combined with some physical presence. So whatever steps you take to make it look like you want to live there, and then you actually do spend some time there, even if that's not full time, and simply, quote unquote, residing in Indonesia, i.e. having it as your permanent home. And so you can see how those tests are subjective. When we work with someone who wants to leave Canada or Australia or the UK or Germany, and they need to become what colloquially is known as tax non-resident, they're exiting their country's tax system. We work with our tax advisors all around the world, and we make sure that they are getting rid of the things that tie them to the country. But what we always tell you is you don't want to go to a country that has high taxes and get into those same ties. So in Indonesia, again, Bali's part of that, intent to reside in Indonesia combined with any physical presence and simply residing in Indonesia, i.e. having it as your permanent home, can be an issue. They can suck you into the tax debt and you will be taxed on your worldwide income. And so I think that people misunderstand this, right? If you are part of a residential taxation system, that will generally mean, absent certain exclusions or the absence of certain rules, that if you have a company overseas, that company could be sucked into the tax net in the same way. And so, Bali can be a place that you can live part-time, but you really want to look at the residence permit, you want to look at your intent, you want to look at all these tests. So this is the kind of thing that we would work with our clients on. Let's say you're leaving Australia, you want to move to Bali. Well, we have people in Australia, we have people in Indonesia, we have immigration, we have tax, we have company formation, which you're going to do somewhere else. In this scenario, you're going to form your company in Hong Kong, for example, or Labuan in Malaysia, or the Cayman Islands, or any number of other tax-neutral places. We do all that under one roof for our clients, and we take the goody two-shoes perspective of being conservative rather than just running around thinking, ha-ha, they're not going to find me. We have had people who have gotten found by tax authorities in a number of countries, and that's why they came to us was, I guess just thinking they're not going to find me isn't going to work. If you want our help, you go to nomadcapitalist.com/apply. We do ask you have either $500,000 in annual income from your business or $1 million or more in liquid assets. But that's the approach that we would take, is if you're going to go to Bali and you want it to be tax friendly, it has to be a seriously part-time place. And you've really got to make sure that you're not doing things that suck you into the debt. And by the way, this can apply to tourists as well. And Indonesia is not the only country. If you meet a day's test simply by spending time on tourist visas, you can be sucked into the tax debt. We had a gentleman many years ago who called us. He spent too much time working for someone in the United States, and he was in the United States too long. He's not a U.S. citizen. He got sucked into the tax debt with all the hell that comes with that, just by spending too long in the U.S. So even if you're just going as a tourist, people think, let's get a tourist visa, in, out, in, out. Southeast Asian countries in general are somewhat cracking down. And I know people in Indonesia are still doing that, but it's not going to help your tax. I mean, if that works for immigration, it's not going to be an acceptable defense for tax that, hey, I'm just on a tourist visa. You could still demonstrate intent to reside in Indonesia, and you certainly could actually be residing in Indonesia. So let me come to this tax hack. This was passed along by, again, our in-house R&D team. This is not tax advice. If you're working with us, we're going to connect you with actual tax professionals that we organize under one roof. If you're going to do this yourself, find a tax professional. Don't take it from me, because we're boiling this down. But here's the bottom line. Indonesia does have an incentive for some foreigners who become Indonesian tax residents. So you are sucked into the system. You are a tax resident. But there's a regime where you can only be taxed on Indonesian-sourced income for the first 4 years. That means that Hong Kong company, that means those investments in Singapore, that means that bank interest in wherever you're from or wherever you keep your money, that would all not be taxed because it's not Indonesian-sourced. Everything you make in Indonesia would be taxed if you have an Indonesian company, Indonesian salary, Indonesian banks, or if you do some business, rentals, whatever, that's all taxed in Indonesia. But for 4 years and 4 years only, everything else overseas is untouched. So potentially this could be, hey, bring your new bride, bring your new beau, spend 4 years, and then some people who do live in Bali eventually go back home. Maybe that works for you. However, here's the requirements. Number 1, a certificate issued by a government authorized institution, or have a minimum of 5 years work experience in the field of science, technology, and/or math, and an obligation for knowledge transfer to an Indonesian citizen. Now, this also is a little bit subjective, and I think there's probably some ways to make it work without having to be a Leviathan enterprise. But only select high-level professionals in specific fields who commit to working with and training a local talent are eligible to apply for this tax incentive. The program appears, according to the R&D folks that we hire here in-house, to be highly restrictive and not particularly competitive compared to other tax-friendly jurisdictions in Asia that offer tax incentives to a broader range of expatriates. Now, what they do mention is Indonesia has a pretty good network of tax treaties. From my perspective, if you're going to live in Southeast Asia, just what I've done myself is I live as tax neutral a life as possible, and I don't rely on tax treaties. But if you have some certain incomes that a tax treaty can rely on, then Indonesia does have more of that. But overall, our R&D team suggests, not as tax advice, but just as their assessment, this incentive is unlikely to attract a large number of our clients because there are better opportunities. And so if you want to go and set up an operation and transfer knowledge in the area of science, technology, or math to Indonesians, then you could get a 4-year exemption. But you've got other countries in Southeast Asia, Malaysia, Thailand, the Philippines, Singapore, all offer a level of territorial taxation to where by default your foreign income isn't taxed. Malaysia talked about changing that in the next couple of years. I don't see that being the case right now. Thailand did crack down a little bit in terms of now remittances earned starting in 2024. If you earn money, let's say in that Hong Kong company and you send it to Thailand, that can now be taxed. But all the money you don't remit isn't taxed. So Thailand basically implemented their own version of a non-dom program that you'd find in Ireland, Malta, Cyprus, in Europe. But the bottom line is you've still got 3 or 4 other countries in Asia that out of the box work a lot better than Bali. One of the parts of me being the goody two-shoes is people say, but I just love Bali so much. You know what? I would love a lot of things. I choose to follow the law where I live. I think it's the right thing to do. I think if you choose to live in a place, you are signing on to the so-called social contract. I didn't choose to be born in the United States. I did pay my taxes, but eventually said I don't want to live in your system for a number of reasons, and I left. I think there's nothing wrong with that. We help our clients do it all the time. But if you go and live somewhere, you ought to know what you're getting into. Don't be following, some nomads on a board. And by the way, if you're one of our clients and you have that $1 million or more, $5 million, $10 million, $30 million or more, the people that we work with, you've got a lot more to lose than somebody going around with a backpack running a drop shipping business. Nothing wrong with that. That business can be sucked into the net as well. But you want to be careful. And so, from my perspective, there's other places that have good vibes if you want those low taxes. Bali can be a place that you can visit. I would find somewhere else, whether it's elsewhere in Southeast Asia. There's places, let's say Costa Rica, could be more tax friendly, and people talk about the good vibes there. If you're from North America or Europe, the time zone could be better than Bali for living. There's plenty of places around the world that have some of the same vibes that Bali has. What we help clients do is go through dozens of options because we have 7 or 8 people that all we do is work in R&D. And all they do is keep an eye on what's happening, tax, immigration, all sorts of changes in pretty much every country of consequence around the world. You go to nomadcapitalist.com/apply, and you can put that experience, as well as the fact we've helped thousands of clients move to dozens of different countries. You can put that experience to work for you. We are not the kind of company where you come and all we do is help you move to Bali. All we do is help you move to Dubai. All we do is help you move to Malta. Nothing wrong with that, but we provide a holistic level of service that you probably need 7, 10, 12 different things as part of your plan to make it all work to be in compliance. Don't just move to Bali, keep your bank accounts in Australia, and then think the tax man's never going to get to you. You need some serious planning if you're a 7 or 8 figure entrepreneur. That's what we offer. And I think for that kind of person, Bali's a great place to visit. But unless you're in a relatively unique circumstance, it's probably not a place that you want to live full time if you want to be tax compliant.